Can Trump serve a third term? Hey there, constitutional curious. Welcome back to the channel where we make sense of legal nonsense without all the fancy jargon or partisan baggage. Today, we're diving into something that's been making the rounds recently, and that's this idea that Donald Trump could somehow serve a third presidential term. Trump seems like he's becoming the Pirates of the Caribbean. They just keep making more sequels that we didn't ask for. Now, before we jump in, I really encourage you to stick around to hear what our founding fathers had to say about term limits for presidents. Now, before we get in, you should know about the 22nd Amendment. The 22nd Amendment is pretty clear. No person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice. Well, that was pretty quick. I guess this will be a short video today. Now, I know. If the law was that straightforward, lawyers would be out of a job, and I'd probably be working at Starbucks trying to spell names correctly. So, how did we get here? For most of American history, serving two terms was a tradition, not a rule. It all started with George Washington, the original George W., who basically said, 2 terms and I'm out. See ya. Stop by the farm, have a brewski on me, we'll shoot the breeze. Now, well, he never explicitly advocated for 2 terms as a limit. He did seem worried that one person holding the office for too long may cause problems. Other founding fathers were a bit mixed on the idea. Thomas Jefferson was particularly concerned about unlimited presidential terms. He wrote Edward Rutledge in 1788 expressing his concern. I apprehend that the total abandonment of the principle of rotation in the offices of president and senator will end in abuse. But my confidence is that there will be for a long time virtue and good sense enough in our countrymen to correct abuses. Jefferson tapped out after 2 terms like Washington. James Madison, however, had reservations about strict term limits. He argued that frequent elections might be a better check on power than forcing legislators out of office by law. Madison was concerned that too many new members with limited information could be vulnerable to manipulation. He wrote, "The greater the population of new members and the less the information of the bulk of the members, the more apt they will be to fall into snares that may be laid for them." After Washington, and for 150 years, presidents followed his example, just like 90s kids emulating Michael Jordan's fadeaway jumper. That is until Franklin D. Roosevelt. Emphasis on the D. He came along, he said, amateurs, I'm going to four-peat this. FDR served during the Great Depression and World War II. And he just kept on winning elections until he passed away in office just a few days into his 4th term. Just imagine how long he could have gone if he didn't have so many pre-existing health issues. Republicans in Congress basically had a conniption. They had a political panic attack. And many Democrats agreed that they needed to have a change. So they all got together. They said, we need to make sure that this never happens again. And thus, the 22nd Amendment was born in 1947 and ratified in 1951. Now, on to the creative interpretations that some folks have cooked up about how Trump could serve a 3rd term. I think we should call them constitutional fan fiction. Theory 1, the Rube Goldberg presidency. This theory goes like this. The 22nd Amendment says no one can be elected more than twice. So Trump could serve as vice president. And then the president could resign. And voila, President Trump starts his third term without ever being elected to office. People sharing the presidency like they do their Netflix account is probably not the best approach, and it clearly violates the obvious intent of the constitutional amendment. And here's where things get a little more interesting. The 12th Amendment, it says, no person constitutionally ineligible for the office of president shall be eligible to that of vice president. Some would argue that the 12th Amendment was written in 1804 when constitutional ineligible only referred to the original eligibility requirements in Article 2, those being at least 35 years old, a natural-born citizen, and resident for 14 years. Their argument is that since the 22nd Amendment didn't exist yet, it couldn't have been what the 12th Amendment was referring to. This argument has some surface appeal. After all, the 12th Amendment came 143 years before the 22nd Amendment. How could it possibly refer to something that didn't exist yet? But there are some major problems with this theory. First of all, constitutional provisions don't exist in a time bubble. When we add a new amendment, they integrate with and amend the existing document. That's how amendments work. They amend the whole Constitution. Otherwise, we would have a constitutional lasagna with layers that don't interact. Secondly, the phrase constitutionally ineligible is forward-looking. Had the writers of the 12th Amendment only wanted to limit it to Article 2, they would have made that clear. But they didn't. They were looking to the future. They were looking to what other restrictions in the future might the citizens of the United States want to put on their office for president. When the 22nd Amendment says that someone who's served 2 terms can't be elected again, that makes that person constitutionally ineligible for the presidency, which would therefore trigger the 12th Amendment's VP prohibition. Third, this interpretation would defeat the entire purpose of the 22nd Amendment. If someone could just be VP and then step into the presidency, the term limit would be meaningless. In other words, the Constitution isn't just some all-you-can-eat buffet where you can pick and choose what you want. It's IKEA furniture. You need all those parts. They all work together to make the whole thing work. Otherwise, it's going to collapse the moment you sit on it. Theory 2, the non-consecutive terms argument. Another theory suggests that the 22nd Amendment only prevents 2 consecutive terms. But the amendment doesn't say consecutive anywhere. It just says no person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice. It's like if your doctor told you can only have 2 cookies a day, and you're like, but I won't eat them consecutively, so I can have 2 cookies in the morning and then I have 2 cookies at night. No. Sorry, there is no constitutional sugar rush. So what would happen if someone tried to challenge the 22nd Amendment or tried to find a loophole? One possibility is that the Supreme Court could step in, or the Supreme Court could punt. The Supreme Court could use something called the political question doctrine. This is the idea that there are some things that are just outside the realm of judicial review. Some things are left for the political branch. These are things where the Supreme Court says, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot gavel. It's particularly when those questions are best left to the other branches of the government. It's like when you ask your dad a really tough question and he says, go ask your mother. Except in this case, the Supreme Court says, go ask Congress, or go figure it out for yourself, voters. In some instances where the court has used this are cases involving foreign policy or impeachment or partisan gerrymandering or congressional internal regulations. In those areas, the court tends to just sit back a little bit and let things play out, or they kick it to Congress to make a determination. Now, is the court likely to resort to this doctrine here? Seems like a long shot. In U.S. Term Limits versus Thornton in 1995, the Supreme Court struck down state-imposed term limits on members of Congress. While this is not directly about presidential term limits, the court emphasized that qualifications for federal office are fixed by the Constitution, and they can't be altered except by constitutional amendment. This means Congress passing a law that will allow Trump to run a third term isn't going to be enough, or states stepping in and allowing him to be on the ballot isn't going to be enough to change what is constitutionally required. Essentially, the court says the Constitution is spoken, and neither states or creative lawyers can find any workarounds. There is a chance, albeit small, that the court may punt on it or may throw out precedent. But again, it seems unlikely. There's also serious practical considerations. Even if someone's found a theoretical constitutional loophole, which I really haven't found a clear one yet, there are a lot of practical barriers that would make a third term virtually impossible. First of all, political parties control their nomination process. The Republican National Committee would have to agree to nominate someone who was going to be facing immediate legal challenges. The real possibility of legal challenges may give any challenger a significant edge. Second, state officials would have to agree to put that person on the ballot, knowing that they might be violating the Constitution. Many state and local officials take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and the language is still pretty clear. Third, even if they won, they would face immediate legal challenges that would likely reach the Supreme Court faster than you can say constitutional crisis. And finally, the military and other government officials all take an oath to uphold the Constitution and not to follow whoever happens to be sitting in the Oval Office claiming to be president. The point is, our constitutional system has multiple layers of protections. It's like one of those Russian nesting dolls, except instead of dolls, it's checks and balances all the way down. I think the main takeaway from the various views of our founding fathers was that in the end, it should be the Constitution that is king, not an individual. Now, I'm not going to get into the intricate policy discussions about whether or not we should have term limits and the pros and cons and things like that. I think that's a whole nother discussion. If you are interested in that discussion, please check out my last video on legislative term limits. It's all about how everything that we know and are told about legislative term limits is wrong. So check it out. I hope you enjoy it. So where does this leave us with the third term question? The constitutional answer is clear. Barring a new amendment, no one who has been elected president twice can be elected again. Full stop. End of the constitutional story. The political noise around this issue is just that. It's noise. It's the constitutional equivalent of trying to convince the movie theater to let you in without a ticket because you really want to see the show. Well, we're all entitled to our own opinions. We're not entitled to our own constitution. That document belongs to all of us, and it says what it says. And now you know what it says. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this video is that understanding that our actual Constitution is way more interesting than fan fiction versions floating around online. The real thing has served us for 230 years through insurrections, financial crises, pandemics, and countless political crises. And that was just the last 5 years. That's not because it's perfect. It's because it creates a framework where we can resolve our differences through laws and votes and not through force and personality. So the next time someone tells you they found some sort of clever constitutional loophole, remember, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably belongs in the same category as those emails from those Nigerian princes wanting to share a fortune with you. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this constitutional myth-busting session, hit subscribe for more legal explainers that won't put you to sleep. And remember, knowing your actual constitutional rights is way more powerful than believing in constitutional fairy tales. And hey, if you have ideas for other constitutional questions you'd like me to tackle, drop them in the comments below. Until next time, stay legally literate, my friends.